Have you ever wondered why some people exercise magnetic power over others, while you are still looking for answers in wrong places? That secret that nobody tells you, that key that opens all the doors of human desire, is buried in the writings of one of the brightest and most feared strategists in history. Today I will reveal to you what the system does not want you to know, the forbidden method that Machiavelli concealed between lines in his texts about power. It is no accident that the most influential men in history have studied these principles in secret. If what you have tried so far has not worked, if you feel that something is missing in your ability to captivate, stay with me, like right now, because what you will discover in the next few minutes could forever transform your way of relating. This ancient knowledge, adapted to our times, is the scalpel that will separate your past from failures from a future where you decide who wishes you. Nicholas Machiavelli never imagined that his strategies to conquer kingdoms would serve to conquer hearts. However, in her masterpiece, The Prince, written in 1513 while suffering exile and torture, lie the deepest secrets of human nature. Machiavelli understood something that most men will never understand. Desire does not follow courtesy rules or built with flowers and chocolates. Desire is a wild beast that responds to primary stimuli, uncertainty, mystery, and above all to perceived power. The first thing you should understand is that attraction is not a conscious choice. When she looks at you, she is not making a mental list of your qualities. He is feeling. His body, his primitive mind, is evaluating whether you are the source of intense emotions that his nature seeks. And this is where Machiavelli offers us his first forbidden lesson. It is better to be feared than loved, if you cannot be both. I translated into the language of seduction. It is better to generate emotional intensity than comfort. Think about it for a moment. How many times have you seen incredible women obsessed with men who make them feel insecure, who keep them in that state of constant anxiety, wondering if they are up to it? How many times have you been the good boy that is always available, always predictable, always boring? Comfort kills desire. The certainty turns off the flame. Machiavelli knew it, and the great seducers of history as well. The forbidden method begins with a fundamental principle: control the rhythm. In politics, Machiavelli taught the princes not to be predictable, to keep their subjects and enemies in constant uncertainty about their upcoming movements. In seduction, this translates into becoming an inexhaustible source of varied emotions. One day you are intense and passionate, the next distant and mysterious. A moment you open your heart, the next you establish unwavering limits. This emotional sway creates a state of psychological dependence that modern neuroscientists have confirmed. Intermittent reinforcement is the most powerful of all. When a mouse receives food every time you press a lever, you soon lose interest. But when the reward arrives unpredictably, the mouse will press the lever obsessively until the exhaustion. The same goes for human desire. Predictability is the poison of desire. Uncertainty, its fuel. I remember Carlos, a student of mine who applied this principle with a woman who had rejected him 3 times. Instead of chasing her as before, she began to show intense but brief attention, followed by periods of complete absence. He took a look at his inner world and then closed as a forbidden book. In 2 weeks, she wrote her constantly. In a month, I was completely obsessed, wondering what was in him that he could not decipher at all. But be careful. This is not an empty manipulation game. It is a deep recognition of human nature. We all yearn for what we cannot completely possess, what we cannot predict, which challenges us. Machiavelli did not invent these principles. He simply had the courage to articulate them when others preferred to live in the fantasy of an ideal world that has never existed. The first step of the method is, therefore, to become a source of variable but authentic emotions. Do not feed disinterest if you are interested. Do not feed mystery if you have no depth. Authenticity is fundamental, but dosing is supreme art. As the Florentine strategist said, men in general judge more for the eyes than by the hands, because everyone is given to see but feel a few. Show your value, but never allow you to feel that you have you completely. When you dominate this first principio, you will see that she begins to think about you when you are not present. You will begin to analyze your words, interpret your silences, to anticipate your movements. And it is then, only then, when you have planted the seed of the emotional addiction that Machiavelli understood 500 years ago, while observing how the great leaders kept whole peoples under their spell. If there is something that Machiavelli understood perfectly, it was that every human interaction has elements of conflict and cooperation. In its less known but equally brilliant work, The Art of War, establishes principles that, applied to seduction, create an irresistible magnetic field around who dominates them. The second pillar of the forbidden method is what I call strategic tension, the ability to create and resolve emotional conflicts so that they generate addiction. Most men make a fatal mistake. They try to eliminate all friction in their interactions with the women they want. They become complacent, in conflict avoiding, foreseeable beings whose sole objective seems to never bother. Machiavelli would laugh at this strategy. I knew that the absence of tension is the absence of passion, that without resistance, there is no conquest, that without obstacles, there is no victory to savor. The forbidden method teaches you to deliberately create small conflicts that intensify the emotional bond. I do not speak of fights or destructive discussions, but of challenges, of moments of tension that require resolution. When you show a woman who does not fear the conflict that you can keep your center during the emotional storm, you are communicating at the subconscious level that you are a leader, a protector, someone with whom she can feel safe precisely because you are not afraid to face the difficult. A practical example. Instead of accepting all your opinions or preferences, question them occasionally, not for contradicting but to explore its depth. If he says he loves a certain movie, ask him why and gently challenge his reasons. If you propose a plan, it suggests an alternative that reflects your own desires. These mini conflicts generate respect and paradoxically increase attraction. Machiavelli wrote, "It is not the strength but the perseverance of high feelings that makes superior men." Translated into our context, it is not your ability to please, but your ability to maintain your principles and vision that makes you magnetic. Women are not attracted to men who can control, but by men who cannot control, but with those who feel safe. I remember Miguel's case, a brilliant executive who in his personal life was unable to maintain women's interest beyond a few weeks. His problem? He avoided all friction, anticipated every need, solved every problem before it arose. When he learned to implement strategic tension, to allow small challenges in the relationship, the dynamics completely changed. The woman who seemed to get bored now was constantly looking for him, intrigued by this new dimension. The art of emotional war also implies knowing when to retire. Machiavelli advised the generals, never try to win by force what can be won by the strategy. In seduction, this means recognizing when a conflict is not worth it and when it is better to give strategically. It is not about winning each battle, but about winning the war for his heart and his mind. Another crucial aspect of this principle is expectations management. Machiavelli observed that men are so simply constituted, and they undergo their present needs, that whoever cheats will always find who is deceiving. I'm not suggesting deceiving, but understanding that people tend to believe what they want to believe. If you establish from the beginning that you are a man with options, with a rich and complex life, with clear limits, she will accept these conditions. If you try to change the rules later, suddenly creating more availability or dependence, you will break the spell. Strategic tension is also manifested in the physical. The intermittent, intense physical contact in some moments and completely absent in others creates a sensory hunger that keeps desire alive. A hands during dinner, followed by physical distance during dessert. A passionate kiss followed by an early farewell. These contrasts generate an emotional roller coaster that the brain associates with you, creating addiction to your presence. What few men understand is that emotional predictability is boring, and boredom is the silent murderer of passion. When she can predict exactly how you will react, what will you say, what will you do in each situation, magic disappears. The mystery evaporates, and with him, desire. Machiavelli knew. Men almost always walk along paths through by others and do nothing but imitate their predecessors. Break that mold. Be the man who keeps the creative tension alive, that he does not fear the conflict because he knows that the spark that ignites the passion is born from friction. Machiavelli understood a fundamental truth about power. Sometimes, absence is more shocking than presence. In his writings, he advised the rulers occasionally absent from their territories to strengthen their image. The third pillar of the forbidden seduction method is what I call the strategic vacuum, the deliberate creation of emotional spaces that she will feel the irresistible impulse to fill. Nature hates the void. When you create a space of silence, absence, mystery, active in the other, a powerful psychological mechanism that drives it to fill it with its own fantasies, desires, and interpretations. And the fascinating thing is that these projections are usually much more powerful than anything you could offer directly. Think of great works of art. What makes them memorable? It is not only what they show, but what they suggest, what they leave to the imagination. An enigmatic smile like Mona Lisa has captivated the world for centuries, precisely because she does not reveal everything. Your presence in a woman's life must work with the same principle. Show enough to intrigue, hide enough to fascinate. The strategic vacuum is implemented in multiple forms. The most obvious is physical absence, periods in which you are not available, in which your attention is completely focused on your own passions and projects. Machiavelli said, "A prince must have two fears, an internal one, with respect to his subjects, another external, with respect to powerful foreigners." Translated into our context, your greatest fear should not be to lose it, but to lose yourself, to your purpose, to your center. When you temporarily disappear from your radar, not by manipulative game, but because you have a rich and complete life genuinely, you create a vacuum that amplifies your value. In your absence, she will reflect on the qualities that make you unique. It will unconsciously compare the emotional intensity that you experience with you, with the monotony that you may feel with others. And it is in that comparison where addiction is born. I remember Javier, a talented artist who was always available to the woman who was interested. He answered messages instantly, canceled plans with friends if she invited him at the last minute. He basically organized her entire life around her availability. The result? She valued him less and less. When he learned to create strategic vacuum, to dive into his art for days, to travel alone without constantly reporting, the dynamics changed radically. She began to chase him, to value every shared moment, to feel that delicious fear of losing it that is the fuel of the lasting attraction. The strategic vacuum is also manifested in communication. Most men talk too much, they explain too much, they reveal too much. In their anxiety to impress, they saturate the conversational space without leaving room for curiosity. Machiavelli observed that men generally judge more for eyes than for intelligence, because everyone can see, but few understand what they see. Speak less, communicates more. A sustained look communicates more than 1,000 words of flattery. A comfortable silence but loaded with intensity creates more attraction than an hour of trivial conversation. This principle also applies to personal revelation. The modern tendency to total transparency from the beginning kills the mystery that feeds desire, reveals your layers gradually, as a landscape that is slowly discovered with the light of dawn. Let her work to really know you, that she feels that each revelation is a privileged one, not an automatic right. Machiavelli understood human psychology so deeply that their observations transcend centuries. He wrote, "Men more quickly forget the death of his father than the loss of his heritage. What we do not have completely obsessed more than what we take for granted. When you are partially unknowable, when you maintain aspects of yourself as territories to conquer, you become an emotional heritage that she will fear." The strategic vacuum also operates in the plane of emotions. You do not need to verbalize every feeling, explain each reaction. The man who maintains some emotional opacity, who does not need constant validation or explanation, communicates a magnetic interior strength. It is not about being cold or distant, but also having an inner core that remains sovereign, inaccessible even in the deepest intimacy. This principle is perhaps the most difficult to implement for the moderno, educated in a culture that values constant availability, incessant communication, absolute transparency. But remember, what is obtained effortlessly is little. When she feels that there are depths in you that has not yet explored, when she intuits that there are territories of your being that require merit and courage to be discovered, the desire to conquer those spaces becomes irresistible. The strategic vacuum is the art of suggestion, of the not said, of the barely insinuated. It is the negative space that defines the form. It is the silence between the notes that music creates. Dominate him, and you will see how she begins to pursue your essence as the explorer who has glimpsed a treasure and will not rest until she completely possesses it. In the heart of Machiavellian philosophy, two fundamental concepts lie: virtue, but not in the moral sense, but as strength, excellence, capacity, and fortune, chance, circumstances, which is outside our control. The fourth pillar of the forbidden method is the masterful integration of these two concepts to create an irresistible magnetic field around you. Machiavelli wrote, "Fortune is a referee of half of our actions, but lets us govern the other half, or almost." In Seduction, this translates into a powerful truth. You cannot control if she will feel initial attraction towards you, fortune, but you can cultivate qualities that maximize your possibilities and, more importantly, you can absolutely determine how you respond to its signals, virtue. Most men make two fatal mistakes. Some believe that attraction is purely a matter of luck or physical appearance, overestimate fortune, while others think that mechanically following certain steps will guarantee results, overestimate their control. The forbidden method teaches you to navigate the delicate balance between these ends. First, you must cultivate your seductive virtual, those intrinsic qualities that make you magnetic regardless of your external circumstances. Machiavelli observed that the most effective leaders combine strength and cunning, the nature of the lion and that of the fox. In modern terms, develop both your physical presence and your assertiveness, the lion, and your emotional intelligence and your strategic capacity, the fox. Physical presence is not limited to conventional appeal. It's about how you occupy the space, your posture, your gaze, your voice, your rhythm when moving. Physical training is not vanity, it is cultivation of your personal power. Your body is the vehicle of your essence. Take care of it as the prince takes care of his army, with unwavering discipline. Simultaneously, develop your emotional intelligence. Learn to read the subtle emotional states, to anticipate reactions, to create memorable experiences. The consumed seducer is an architect of significant moments. He does not seek to constantly impress, but to print his essence in the emotional memory of who accompanies him. I remember Eduardo, a man of common appearance, but whose magnetic presence constantly attracted extraordinary women. His secret: he had meticulously cultivated both his internal strength, physical discipline, clarity of purpose, courage to face his fears, and his deep understanding of female psychology. He did not manipulate. He orchestrated experiences where they could both shine at their most expression. The second aspect of this principle is the appropriate response to fortune. Machiavelli observed that even the brightest leaders eventually faced unexpected setbacks. The difference between triumph and failure was its ability to adapt. He wrote, "You need to be a fox to know the traps, and lion to intimidate the wolves." In seduction, this means developing both acute perception to detect opportunities and dangers, as well as the strength to act decisively when the moment requires it. When she shows interest, you do not overflow with enthusiasm or retract for insecurity. You respond with calibrated appreciation, climbing the intimacy gradually. When you perceive disinterest or ambivalence, do not collapse or pleading. Strategically backward, focusing on your own growth and other valuable relationships in your life. Fortune management also implies what Machiavelli called cause, the recognition and use of the right time. There are fleeting moments where the attraction reaches its critical point, where a bold action can crystallize in reality. The Machiavellian seductor develops a sixth meaning for these moments, acting with decision when others hesitate. Martin, a brilliant but socially clumsy student, transformed his love life when he learned this principle. Before, it let clear signs of interest, paralyzed by fear of rejection. Or worse, it acted prematurely, confessing feelings before Burr generated sufficient attraction. By learning to recognize the right timing, to feel the emotional temperature of the moment, their interactions changed radically. He now recognized when a sustained look was an invitation to approach, when a silence was the perfect pause for a first kiss, when a deep conversation opened the door to a more intimate connection. Machiavelli also emphasized the importance of virtù in preparation for adverse fortune. He wrote, "A prudent prince must build his foundations on what is under his control, not what others control." In practical terms, it develops such a rich, full, and exciting life that no specific woman has the power to devastate you emotionally. When your happiness and personal value do not depend on female validation, paradoxically, you become much more attractive. This balance between virtù and fortuna is also manifested in what you communicate about yourself. Never present yourself as a finished, perfect, incapable growth product. Nor do you show yourself as an incomplete project in need of salvation. The optimal point is to project yourself as a man on a mission, aware of his strengths, constantly working on his improvement areas, inviting her not to complete you, but to complement you on your trip. The most subtle application of this principle is what I call strategic vulnerability, the calculated revelation of past weaknesses or wounds that humanize your strength. Machiavelli understood that the perfect prince generated distrust. The prince who occasionally showed his limitations, but surpassed them with determination, inspired lasting loyalty. I remember Ricardo, a successful businessman whose apparent perfection created emotional distance with women. When he learned to selectively share his moments of doubt, his past failures, his specific vulnerabilities, not as a search for pity, but as a sign of authenticity, the emotional connection it generated was exponentially deepened. Women no longer saw only the impeccable businessman, but the complete human resilient man. This balance between strength and vulnerability, between control and adaptability, between the fox and the lion, is perhaps the most sophisticated aspect of the forbidden method. It is not dominated in days or weeks, but through conscious practice and deep reflection. But once incorporated, it becomes second nature, the source of a magnetism that transcends surface techniques and touches the primitive core of female desire. If there is a concept that Machiavelli understood deeply, it was the economy of power, how political, military, and social resources flow, accumulate, and invest strategically. The fifth pillar of the forbidden method transfers this understanding to the emotional terrain, establishing what I call emotional economy, the strategic management of your effective resources to maximize your value and generate sustained desire. In simple terms, your attention, validation, time, emotional energy, and vulnerability are limited and precious resources. The way in which you distribute directly determines your perceived value and, therefore, the intensity of the desire you generate. Machiavelli wrote, "Men think they deserve what they have, but they want more than they deserve." This observation reveals a fundamental truth about human psychology that perfectly applies to the dynamics of attraction. The first principle of the emotional economy is the perceived scarcity. What is abundant is devalued. What is scarce is valued. Most men make the mistake of flooding women who are interested with constant attention, immediate validation, and unlimited availability. In doing so, they communicate unconsciously, "My time and attention have little value. I can give them without having to deserve them." The forbidden method invests this dynamic. Your attention should be like water in the desert, absolutely vital and relatively scarce. When you are with her, you are completely present, intensely focused, creating a powerful emotional experience. When you are not, you are truly absent, immersed in your purpose and passions. This alternation creates an intermittent reward pattern that, as neuroscientists have demonstrated, generates the most powerful form of conditioning. I remember Daniel, a brilliant but desperately in love with a woman who had him in the friend zone. His mistake: he was always available. He responded immediately each message. He canceled guards to see it, essentially communicating that her professional time, valued in hundreds of dollars per hour for her patients, for her was worth zero. When he learned to implement the emotional economy, establishing clear limits to its availability and attention, the dynamics changed completely. She began to strive to deserve her time, to value each interaction, to pursue your attention as the valuable resource that it really was. The second principle is proportional investment. Machiavelli advised the princes carefully evaluating where to invest their military and diplomatic resources based on the expected return. In seduction, this means constantly calibrating your emotional investment so that it is slightly or equal, never significantly greater than it. This does not mean being calculator or cold, but be aware of the energy balance between them. If you send 3 messages for each one that she sends, if you plan each appointment while she barely contributes, if you are constantly entertaining emotionally, create an unsustainable dynamic that will eventually kill the attraction. Proportional investment also applies to personal revelation and vulnerability. Machiavelli observed that leaders must carefully dose the information they share, revealing only what they need to achieve their objectives. In modern terms, your personal history, your wounds, your fears, your deepest dreams are treasures that must be won. Do not give gifts in the first date. Fernando applied this principle with surprising results. He normally shared his traumatic family history in the first quotes, unconsciously seeking to generate intimacy through premature vulnerability. The result? Women who initially seemed interested rapidly cooled. When he learned to reveal his deepest layers gradually, in response to equivalent vulnerability on his part, he created a dynamic of mutual discovery that intensified the connection with time. The third principle of emotional economy is what Machiavelli would call the value of the alliance, the subtle demonstration that others value your company and attention. It is not about causing jealousy, but naturally showing that you are a man with options, with a solid social network, with people who value your time and energy. Social pre-selection is one of the most powerful shortcuts towards female attraction. When she perceives that other women, especially attractive and interesting women, enjoy your company, her primitive brain records, "This man has something valuable that other women recognize." Machiavelli understood that visible alliances with other powerful states automatically strengthened the prince's negotiating position. The same principle applies in seduction. Alejandro, a brilliant but socially isolated introvert, transformed his love life when, instead of obsessively chasing one woman after another, he invested 6 months to build a solid, diverse, and genuine social circle. When she finally met the woman who interested her, she could immediately see that others valued her presence, that she had a social life rich independent of her. This natural demonstration of social value made more for its attractiveness than any tested line or artificial technique. The fourth principle of emotional economy is strategic reinvestment. Machiavelli advised the rulers to reinvest the resources obtained from a territory to strengthen their global position, not simply to please that specific territory. In seduction, this means that when she shows interest, investment, or desire, you should not simply return it in the same way, but to reinvest it in your personal growth, in the expansion of your abilities, in strengthening your general position. Specifically, if she begins to show you more attention and affection, do not respond simply with more attention and affection for her. Use that positive energy as a fuel to advance your personal projects, to cultivate new skills, to expand your influence in other areas of your life. Paradoxically, this strategic reinvestment will further increase your value to your eyes, creating a virtuous cycle of increasing attraction. Raoul applied this principle when the woman who had pursued for months finally began to show romantic interest. Instead of abandoning all his activities to focus exclusively on the nascent relationship, he used that positive energy to finally launch the business project that he had postponed by insecurity. The result? She felt even more attracted to her ambition and determination, and the relationship flourished precisely because he did not make her the exclusive center of her universe. The most controversial aspect of the emotional economy is what Machiavelli would call the economy of truth. He wrote, "A prince is not necessary to have all the virtues cited, but it is very necessary that he seem to have them." In contemporary terms, perception is as important as reality. This does not mean lying or manufacturing a false image, but understanding that the way you present to you truth directly impacts how you are perceived and valued. If you are coming out of a painful relationship, you do not need to present yourself as newly separated and processing an emotional duel, even if it is technically true. You can introduce yourself as, in a moment of personal reinvention, rediscovering parts of me that I had forgotten. Both statements can be true, but the second generates a completely different perception. Emotional economy is not manipulation. It is strategic management of limited resources. We all have finitude of time, energy, attention, and emotional capacity. Distributing them wisely is not selfish, it is responsibility. As Machiavelli said, "Men before forget the death of their father than the loss of their heritage." Your emotional energy is your most valuable heritage. Administer it with the same diligence with which you would manage your financial fortune. When you dominate the principles of the emotional economy, you will see that women begin to value every moment with you, each message, each sample of affection as the treasure it really is. And in that space of genuine valuation, emotional addiction blooms naturally, without manipulation, without games, simply as the inevitable result of having restored the natural balance of human desire. The last and deepest pillar of the forbidden Machiavelli method is what I call the alchemy of power, the ability to transform different types of power into magnetic attraction. Machiavelli understood that power comes in multiple forms, and that true mastery was to know how to transmute them according to circumstances. This principle, applied to seduction, creates an irresistible magnetism that transcends surface techniques. The first element of this alchemy is personal power. Machiavelli wrote, "There is nothing more difficult to carry in hand, or more dangerous to drive, than to establish a new order of things. The man who seeks to transform his capacity for attraction must first transform himself, establishing a new internal order." This personal power is manifested as a presence, the intangible but immediately noticeable quality of a man focused on his purpose, aware of his value, anchored in unwavering principles. The presence cannot be pretended. It must be cultivated genuinely. It comes from congruence between thought, word, and action, of the commitment to personal excellence regardless of external validation, of the ability to remain calm in situations where others lose control. This personal power is the raw material of all effective seduction. I remember Santiago, a common-looking man, but whose presence immediately filled any room. He did not raise his voice. He did not seek attention. There was simply in such internal solidity that all women naturally gravitated towards him. Your secret: years of inner work, disciplined meditation, absolute clarity about its values and limits, and the ability to remain completely present in each interaction. The second element is social power. Machiavelli meticulously observed how certain leaders built networks of influence that amplified their authority beyond their tangible resources. In modern terms, your attraction capacity is multiplied exponentially when you are a central node in valuable social networks, when you have the ability to connect people, when you are perceived as someone who opens doors and creates opportunities. This social power is not about superficial popularity or accumulating followers on social networks. It is about cultivating genuine relationships with extraordinary people, of becoming the type of man who adds value to each circle that integrates. When she perceives that your presence in her life could expand her horizons, connect it with fascinating people, expose it to new ideas and experiences, her attraction towards you transcends the purely physical or emotional. Oscar completely transformed his love life when, instead of pursuing romance, he dedicated himself to building a community around his passion for astronomy. He organized night observations, connected enthusiasts with professionals, created memorable experiences under the stars. Without looking directly, it became a magnet for intelligent and curious women who valued not only their knowledge, but their ability to create a vibrant and significant social space. The third element is the power of meaning. Machiavelli understood that the most influential leaders not only controlled resources or territories, but also offered powerful narratives that gave meaning to collective experience. In modern seduction, this translates into your ability to create significant experiences, to transform the ordinary into extraordinary, to offer a worldview that expands its perspective. In an era of superficial consumption and ephemeral connections, the man who can create moments of depth, of beauty, of transcendent meaning, has an incomparable power of attraction. It is not about material grandiosity, but of attention to the essential, a conversation that touches universal truths, a walk that reveals hidden beauty in everyday life, an experience that awakens genuine astonishment. These moments create emotional addiction because they nourish the deepest hunger of the human soul, the search for meaning. Lucas, a professor of modest resources literature, constantly generated attraction in extraordinary women because he had dominated the art of creating significant experiences. A simple walk with him became an exploration of hidden stories in urban architecture. A homemade dinner was transformed into a sensory trip through flavors and anecdotes connected to each ingredient. He had no material wealth, but offered experiential wealth, and that was magnetic. The fourth element of this alchemy is the power of polarity. Machiavelli observed that certain leaders created dynamic tension between apparently opposite qualities. They were simultaneously feared and loved, accessible and mysterious, predictable in principles, but unpredictable in actions. This dynamic tension, this ability to embody complementary polarities, is extraordinarily magnetic. In practical terms, the man who can be simultaneously strong and vulnerable, intense and light, ambitious and present, disciplined and spontaneous, creates an emotional magnetic field that attracts deeply. It is not inconsistency, but authentic complexity, not of contradiction, but of complementarity. Andres, a successful businessman, generated instant attraction in sophisticated women precisely by this quality. He could discuss business strategies with fierce intensity and minutes later laugh at himself with child carefree. He could decisively lead in crisis situations and surrender completely on the dance floor. This ability to move fluently between different expressions of masculinity without fragmenting or diluting made it fascinating. The fifth and last element of the alchemy of power is what Machiavelli would call the economy of force, the ability to generate maximum impact with minimal action. The ideal prince, according to Machiavelli, did not constantly need great demonstrations of power. His mere presence, his word measured, his subtle gesture had the weight of a simultaneous promise and threat. In Seduction, this manifests itself as an elegance of action. The man who constantly needs to impress, who speaks too much, that overreacts his emotions, who seeks constant validation, dilutes his power. The man who has dominated the alchemy of power communicates more with less. His sustained look has more impact than an elaborate monologue. Its conscious touch generates more electricity than great gestures. His word, when he finally offers it, has the weight of gold because he does not devalue her with verbal inflation. I remember Gabriel, whose silent presence in social meetings generated more curiosity and intrigue than those who monopolized the conversation. When he finally talked, everyone listened. When he finally touched, electricity was palpable. He had dominated the economy of force, the art of minimum action with maximum impact. Alchemy of power is not domination or control over others. It is a mastery about oneself and the ability to consciously direct the energies that create magnetic attraction. As Machiavelli said, men generally judge more for the eyes than for intelligence because everyone can see, but few understand what they see. Most see surface seduction techniques. Few understand the fundamental principles of personal power that generate genuine and lasting attraction. When you integrate these 5 elements, personal power, social power, power of meaning, power of polarity, and strength economy, you create such a magnetic presence that emotional addiction arises naturally, without manipulation, without games, simply as an inevitable response to your amplified authenticity. This is the true prohibited legacy of Machiavelli. Not tactical to manipulate, but principles to manifest your authentic power of ways that resonate with the deepest truths of human nature. This alchemy dominates, and you will not only transform your ability to attract, but all your life experience. You have reached the end of the road, but this is only the principle of your transformation. The secrets of Machiavelli that you just discovered are not simple techniques. They are scalpels that separate the ordinary man from man who arouses emotional addiction. Each principle that you have learned cut the invisible membrane that has kept you caught in the labyrinth of relational mediocrity. But be careful. This knowledge is a mirror that reflects your true nature. Some will see in him manipulation because they fear their own power. Others will recognize the ancestral truth that they have always sensed. That desire does not follow artificial rules, but natural laws as old as humanity itself. Who does not apply these principles pays an invisible price every day. The cost of a life without the emotional intensity it deserves. The real danger is not what you will do with this knowledge, but what will happen if you decide to ignore it and return to the dream of ingenuity. Listen to that interior whisper that tells you that you have always known these truths. He comments, "Power is not pleaded with, it is exercised, to join those who have awakened." And remember, while others continue to beg female attention, you have discovered how to become the man they pursue obsessively. Soon I will reveal the next level of this forbidden knowledge, but only for those who demonstrated the value of applying what they already know.